Hey everybody, what's up and welcome to episode 86 of Into the Necrosphere. My guest on today's show is Mike Thompson of Withered. I spoke last week of their awesome new record, Verloren, which is available right now on Season of Mist. As soon as I heard that album, I immediately reached out to Katie Irizarry of Season of Mist and said I need to hook up an interview. And Mike did not disappoint. So if you're up for an hour and a half or so of straight music talk, then you're going to really enjoy this one, and you are going to see exactly why. If you have not listened to it yet, you seriously need to pay attention to this record. In my opinion, one of the best of the year so far, and in a year where the great releases have been coming in thick and fast, I think that is really saying something. Also coming up later in the show, I'm going to be talking about a couple of new releases, specifically the new Mayhem EP, the big release of the weekend. I'm also going to be talking about the new record by Domination Campaign called Onward to Glory. So stick around for that after the conversation, and I will also be doing the usual news. And I got some really great feedback off of last week's segment, where I focused less on being a silly goose and more on picking through two specific people's opinions. I spoke about Joseph Duplantier, or whatever the hell his name is, of Gojira, and his views on the coronavirus, and I also spoke on Derek Green's ramblings about Spotify. So who knows what will come this week? To be perfectly honest with you, I've read the news headlines already, and there's probably more to poke fun at than there is to talk seriously about. But you'll see what I mean. Stick around until the end of the show. And you'll hear what the news segment is all about. A couple of the usual household announcements. Hit subscribe on whichever platform you consume podcasts on, whether that's YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Deezer, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio. I mean, as I've said many times before, if your podcast service of choice does not host Into the Necrosphere, that is because it sucks. Also, follow the show on social media. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And if you want to head over to the Into the Necrosphere Teespring store, you will be able to deck yourself out in this type of swanky gear that I'm currently wearing. For those of you watching this on YouTube, Into the Necrosphere t-shirts, hoodies, joggers, and all sorts of cool swag to help you look both stylish and exceptionally badass. I believe that is just about it. On that note, I'm going to shut my mouth and get this fucking show on the road. I'm going to crack open a Coors Light, and then we're going to get started. I am very impressed, by the way, by this iPhone camera of yours, because I've got a Logitech like webcam that I use for this, and as you can see, my Swish Studio, where when I'm too lazy to put the green screen up, you get to see the whatever shit's in the background. But the quality of the camera is surprisingly good.
Yeah, thanks, man. Yeah, I since we do a lot of like gear rundown videos and stuff like that we're doing, I'm hoping to write this off as a tax credit. It's too fucking expensive.
You need to grab hold of those loopholes where you can. I was like an iPhone loyalist for a very long time. And then I got to it's like iPhone 1, iPhone 3G, the iPhone 4, 5, and then I got to the 6. And when they started the battery throttling thing, that's when I tapped out. I was like, "Fuck this! I'm not getting an iPhone."
I think every company pulls fucking stunts all the time, and it's just like whichever ones they get caught by. I mean, it's not an excuse. I am in the tech industry. I've designed vehicle electronics for like 20 years, which is my income in addition to doing Withered, of course. So it just. So I guess I'm a little empathetic with the competitive trials and tribulations of being an electronics manufacturer or designer.
It's like planned. I can't remember what the phrase is. Like
planned obsolescence.
Planned obsolescence. Yeah. I mean, the thing for me was, I guess it wasn't that they were doing it. It's that they were not telling anybody that they were doing it. I think had they turned around and they said, look, almost the way that Microsoft does, and I've got my own beef with Microsoft, but if they said, look, when we get beyond a certain point in our operating system, what'll happen is you'll notice a slowdown in performance on your device. Then I would have gone, okay, I get it. But Jesus,
Yeah.
the way it just suddenly went from working fine to not working. That drove me nuts.
Yeah, of course. Well, yeah, I'm not saying their motivations were justified or anything, or the actions were justified, but it's I don't know. It's just the way everybody does everything, man. We're all a bunch of fucking shysters. So.
Oh yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
So how did you get into the tech racket? Because your day job is machine to machine orientated. You design like dash cams for cars and things like that.
Oh, a little bit. It's mostly like car alarms and like remote car starters and GPS tracking devices and stuff like that. So I've always been interested in tech in general. So, just tinkering with shit since I was a kid. And then when I got, when I started playing music at like 10 or 12 years old, of course, it really comes out of necessity more so, just like being fucking broke all the time and wanting to get the best bang for your buck. So I literally just taught myself how to repair guitars and amplifiers. And then my very first job was at the music store that I took guitar lessons, like when I was 16 or something. And that was only so I could get discounted prices on gear. And of course, working there, they taught me how to really do a lot more as far as repair was concerned. And then they even had a side business of manufacturing cables. And I was like in the dark it was like a little 3-foot wide hallway in the back of the building that was all cinder block with dingy lights. And I was back there huffing solder fumes for like years, just making guitar cables, mic cables, basically any kind of cable, I manufacture them by hand, and yeah, so it just, I don't know. I just always had a knack for it, My dad taught me how to work on cars a little bit and stuff. So when I got old enough to like drive and bought my first car, I taught myself how to work on that fucking thing. And then since I loved music, I got into car audio systems, because I wanted a high quality stereo system to play Slayer and all that shit,
Yeah.
And then so as a result, then I was like, well, shit, I need to protect all of this investment because I'm too broke to replace it. So the last frontier for me was vehicle security. And then lo and behold, I was looking at a magazine one day and saw one of the biggest security manufacturers in the States was right in my backyard, literally 5 minutes away.
Yeah.
So I applied for a job. The music store was struggling. I applied for a job. They hired me in their repair lab, fixing warranty returns. And now I'm the product development manager. Many years later.
About 30, I was about to say, you've been there like for 3 decades, right?
No, not quite. 23 years, but close enough. Yeah.
Yeah. And do any of them know of your alter ego, Mike the Maniac frontman for Withered?
I'm sorry, what was the first part?
I say, does anybody that you work with know of your alter ego?
Mike, they all do, because yeah, it was kind of a thing where man, I got a knack for broken shit, and it's just like, so the company when I came in was literally 3 months after I hired, they laid off half of the company, and somehow I survived because I was, I guess, adept enough, and I was a kind of a go-getter, right? So I went and was doing my damnedest to keep job security. So I really liked the work. So I was teaching myself all kinds of shit when everybody else was just kind of riding the clock because they knew that things were going to hell. I had no idea. But so I survived the layoff, and my manager at the time was also a musician. And so he was empathetic to what I was doing. And long story short, for many, many years, since they couldn't afford to give me raises, I negotiated for freedoms. Yeah. So I made myself invaluable by being creative and doing whatever the fuck I could come up with and really pushing things. And once again, doing more with less, right? So no money, no budget. So I teach myself how to so I took over marketing as well. So I taught myself how to be a web programmer and developer on top of a designer and marketing. And so, yeah, I taught myself full Adobe suite. I can do any of that shit. Creative Clouds, my everyday thing, program in ASP.NET and do full stack web development, all self-taught shit. So it just, and I still work on cars.
Yeah.
For fun. And yeah, and I build a band van and do crazy shit to it, like bunks, and cut the roof and put the high fiberglass roof on it all by myself with a 12-pack of Coors Light, by the way. And yeah. So it, I don't know, it's just, I like to tinker and stuff like that. So I did all that, and in exchange for the freedoms that they afforded me. So, I mean, this is the only deal I've been lucky enough to find and work out to where I can leave for 16 weeks a year or whatever to tour.
And they're all good with that. Has anybody at work actually heard your music?
Yeah, I think everyone out of curiosity has briefly checked it out, but no one's really, there's not many death metal fans here. So it's like, they, I think, instead of me sort of hiding it like I used to, now it's part of our culture and a bit of a novelty for them. So, when we go out to, if I have to go to conventions and sit down with millionaire suppliers or customers, then it's kind of a novelty. Oh, the local rock and roll guy or whatever they want to call it,
I have to say, so I had touched on Grief Relic, and then through the course of time, loads of music comes your way, and I almost sort of put Withered on the back burner a little bit, and then Verloren dropped, and I was absolutely fucking blown away. Like, just I immediately got on the. I mean, I think second listen through, I immediately got on email, told Katie I'd love to speak to somebody from Withered, just because I think. I agree with Andy Sin's comments about you guys on No Clean Singing, that I'm listening to the new record. I am astonished that more people aren't freaking out about it, because it kind of feels like this, it feels like this extremely well kept secret that I've stumbled on. It's like the secret item on the McDonald's menu or something. You know what I mean? It's like I'm. Yeah, I'll kind of stop there so I don't sound like I'm getting too, I wouldn't say pedantic, but you know what I mean. I'm giving you too many compliments. But again, first of all, superb work on the new record. But secondly, how do you feel about how the record has been received so far? How do you feel about kind of, I guess, is it living up to the expectations you had for it when you were in the studio?
I mean, yeah, I think it is. I always, man, I'm so OCD and I overthink everything. And, I literally, so when we go into writing a record, my intention, and especially this is the first record with Dan and Rafe, and but Bo and I, this is our fourth record together. So we've got a pretty long history of, we know what we want. We know what Withered is for us and what we want to do to honor, we don't ever want to detach from our past, right? So we always want to have a familiarity, quote unquote, keeping it withered, is what Bo likes to say. And then always wrapping in something new. But I think the biggest overall intention is, so I grew up, like, the records that really, really did something for me as a kid, I would obsess over them. I would sit down and I would listen to them 1,000 times. And this is the day of cassette tapes. So skipping tracks wasn't really a convenient option, right?
No.
So like you sooner or later, even if you don't like a song, you just kind of stop fast forwarding through it because it's so disruptive to whatever else is going on. And so, I just became a listener that would only enjoy an album if the entire album was worth listening to, right? So then I would, I would put the cassette in my car and it wouldn't leave the cassette player. Like I wouldn't change it out and come back to it. I would play that one cassette hundreds of times in a row. My friends that I would give rides to from school would be so pissed off at me, like, man, when you fucking change the tape, and I just didn't. I would obsess on it, and when I was still growing as a guitar player, I mean, I guess I technically still am, but when I was really going hard at it, I would sit down and learn every single note and every nuance. And I guess that's maybe that technical thing again. Like, I really wanted to understand not just the mechanics of the songwriting and the tone, like all those things are interesting to me, but then it really boiled down to the mechanics of the thought process and the emotional intentions of what these guys are doing when they're making this record or performing it. So if once I can sink a hook into one, when I start to feel something coming from somebody, and especially when you start to understand the context of what they're going through as people at the time when they write the record, it's that much more powerful. And so then I really I beat it to death, man. I'm trying to scrape off every layer and understand every motivation. So for me, I'm sure it's all imagination for me, but you can tell which riffs and which lyrics are the ones that are the deeper meaning ones for these guys, and then which ones are sort of the opposite end of the spectrum or the roller coaster, right? Because an album has to have a journey, right? You got to have a starting point, you got to have the journey and experience, and you got to have a goal for the ending, right? I want every album to be that way. And so those are the ones, that's what makes a timeless album, right? A truly classic album that's going to stand up no matter what, and always be revered and always be played for generations and generations. So that's our intention every time we write a record, is we literally want it to be as timeless as we can possibly muster. And it also, timeless in execution and production, but also it's really also about focusing on the moment that we're writing it. So it's really it's really trying to lock down and etch in stone who we are as people at the moment we're writing these songs, right? And through this whatever it is, 6-month period of time or however long it takes, that we're really capturing each one of us. So it's not just, and that's a big thing for me too, is to be just one perspective for one guy or two guys, just because we're writing the lyrics, it doesn't mean that it's just about us, right? So we even sit down and like with Verloren, it's the concept is lost, right? Which is the most generic, generalized, pointless kind of thing to say, but it's really it's really about specific traumas that each one of us have, and we all share one singular, we all share many losses, but we each have a very poignant, significant, singular loss in our histories that kind of brings us together as a group of 4 guys, and it's how we really connect to each other through the music. So the emotions in the music, like I'm saying, you can tell when it's just sort of that darker, really moodier and more intense sort of a sensation. That's the more meaningful parts of it, that's when we're getting a little more raw emotionally, and then because you can't be that way the whole time, because it'll wear you down to nothing, right? It'll kill you. We need the counterpoints, which are maybe the more hookier riffs or something that's sort of a break from the pain. Is that maybe that's a way to put it, So it's kind of like that. And to the point I was trying to make a second ago, which I ramble a lot, so you're going to enjoy that.
Go for that.
For example, the first song that we really wrote for the album is called The Long Hurt. It's the second track on the B-side, and it's that one was mostly framed up and put together by Rafe, and then he had his specific subject matter based off of his personal traumas, or one significant trauma that he asked me to write about. So So I was kind of the wordsmith, but I sat down with him and made sure that it was really nailing the point down for him, and that we were all connecting through it around this idea and this this event in his life. So yeah, it's really about a lot of that. So
What were
yeah.
some of those records that you were inspired by when you were younger? What were those first kind of cassettes that you owned that that really got you wanting to play guitar? Wanting to get into this music and wanting to make music for a living.
Well, gosh, for some reason I wanted to play guitar my as long as I can remember. Actually, before I can remember, my mom was telling me not too long ago, she was going through my baby book, and apparently on my first or second Christmas, I asked for a guitar. And I don't know why. I don't remember that, but they ended up getting me like a wind-up toy that just clanked and made a song, or whatever. Does it look like a guitar?
Oh yeah. And you get those electric guitars that have like the for kids that have like the 3-4 buttons. You press one and it plays like a whole riff, and then it press
Yeah,
the
well,
next
this
one and
was the
plays a whole riff.
70s, so that shit doesn't
Yeah.
exist back then,
Yeah.
But yeah, same idea, and it's but so I was always interested and wanted to do it, but it wasn't until I was about 10 or 12 that I really got serious, got my first actual guitar and took lessons and started doing that kind of thing. But and I guess I have my sister is 7 years older than me, so she was a teenager at this time, and she had me listening to what she was listening to, which was a lot of hair metal and things like, I guess, like Guns N' Roses when they first came out, and some things like that. But and I still enjoy
which, by the way,
uh-huh.
people can't discount Guns N' Roses. I mean, that was a fucking edgy, dangerous sounding band
Listen,
when
man.
particularly around Appetite for Destruction. I often kind of think back to those those years, and you think, well, that was what a lot of the average teenagers were listening to in the in America and in the UK, and then you go, what are kids listening to nowadays? And it's like, well, like why you would think that progressively the bands that the younger generation listens to should upset their parents, but
Yeah.
I see a distinct difference between Justin Timberlake and Axl Rose in 1987.
Oh
Anyway,
yeah.
but I definitely think, I feel like hair metal. I mean, there was a lot of bullshit in that time as well. But I mean, stuff like Wasp and bands like that. There were some cool, edgy bands in those,
Yeah.
as part of that era.
Yeah, it's like I still love it a lot. There's definitely a lot of bullshit in there, right? Like anything that's a big trend, there's like 20% good bands and 70% garbage, right? So
Yeah.
like, yeah, a lot of those, all the ones that were just about like partying and dating, like that was whatever. But like, you can't tell me that Rocket Clean isn't one of the deepest, it isn't like a dark rock song, man. Rocket Queen is still one of the greatest songs ever. So it's
I
like
mean,
that one gets me every
even
time
some
I
of
hear it.
like the hedonism, I still think is cool. I mean, I just mentioned Wasp now, but
Yeah.
Mantronic, 9-5 Nasty. I mean, they are all fucking cool songs. They all have this edge and this vibe to them that I think Wasp in particular to me kind of stands out a little bit from that crowd because of it. And they were always a
Yeah,
band
they
that even
definitely were
when
a
I was already
crossover
getting
band, right?
Oh yeah. Even when I was already getting into a lot heavier music, they were still a band that remained a mainstay that I never ever moved away from.
Yeah. I like them a lot too. I got into them a little bit later, more closer to being an adult. I kind of came back around to some of that stuff because I guess at about 12, I was when I discovered Metallica, the Injustice for All album. And that's really, that's what I'm telling you about listening to the cassette 1,000 times in my car. That's the album I'm imagining. And I still have that original cassette. I was 11 or 12, and for my birthday, I asked for the cassette single, because
Yeah.
my only exposure was that video, right? And that blew my mind as a kid. That whole concept, that was like an eye opener to the capabilities of humanity and capturing somewhat of that sensation through music. And that's a pretty watered down, whatever tune in general now by comparison, but at 11 years old or 12 years old, it's like, it's pretty significant for me when I had never been exposed to anything else. And that was the first time I found it was just so powerful. I remember running and grabbing my mom and being like, you got to see this video. Like, what is this? I was just blown away that such things existed, So then, I went down the rabbit hole. I asked for the cassette single, but my sister got me the album because they were sold out of the singles. And then I went, holy shit, this whole thing, like Black and Dyer's Eve were so much darker. Like it's even scared me to where I stopped listening to it for a little while. Like, you know what I mean? It was just weird. I grew up suburban in a pretty safe neighborhood, and you know what I mean? I wasn't exposed to anything, any underbellies, right? So then it just, from there, it just captivated me that music could wield that much power emotionally. And that's when I knew exactly what I wanted to do with my life, which is exactly that, was project a wall of energy and emotion, and maybe make somebody feel the way that made me feel, and at that time I had some traumas, I guess, that I was maybe dealing with, and it really helped me with those things, so and which is, I think, why a lot of people are attracted to metal at whatever age. It's definitely, it helps you, the catharsis or whatever it is, just it really helps you release some of that out, and so I just I ran with it, and like I said, it scared me a little bit, and then the Black album came out, and I was like, oh, well, sounds like a different band, and then I went back, and then that was it. And then I listened to Injustice for All like nonstop. And I spent like a year at home every day. I didn't hang out with anybody in school when I started school. And I just went at home and played guitar for 3 hours, just learning that. And then it was Rust in Peace and, all the, I don't know, whatever multitude albums.
So the acceleration begins after that. I do know what you mean about, like, when you're really young and you're discovering this music for the first time. I think you do have those couple of moments where you hear something and you're almost like a bit nervous. Like, I don't know about you. I grew up I've mentioned this before on the podcast, I grew up in a very religious household. So, I grew up believing that I was a Christian. I went to church actually I had to go twice every Sunday because my mom was the organist. So you kind of get to that point where you start negotiating with the Lord. You're like, well, this Metallica can't possibly be evil. They're not singing about Satan. And then, you get to Slayer. It's like, well, they don't really mean it. And you get to Deicide and it's like, well, fuck it. There's no way that they could play that well if you didn't give them the talent. So, maybe their views are misguided, but still they're great. But I remember when I must have been about 11 years old, and I heard, and this would have been 1991. I heard The Thing That Should Not Be for the first time, and I remember the guitar solo coming in, and it's the most fucking, up to that point, the most evil sounding shit that I had ever heard in my entire life, because it's so discordant, and Kirk is all over the place. But just it really freaked me out. Yeah, because there was one moment I remember, and the other one being when I heard Decade of Aggression for the first time, which was the first Slayer record I had. I just remember when Hell Awaits started, the walk back, and then it just sets such a sinister tone for the rest of the record, and it's same as it always did when they played it live, but it really kind of, I was thinking to myself, Jesus, if no pun intended, if Jesus heard this, I'm in trouble. So.
Oh yeah, and that's like, as a kid, it's really hard to reconcile the nuances of fantasy, and it's kind of like horror movies or writing books and that kind of thing. Yeah, some bands do mean what they're saying. Some bands just write for value, sell records, or whatever it is. And so it's like learning to take that with a grain of salt. I also was raised in a Christian household, though luckily they're fairly liberal. Despite being in a heavy Southern Baptist area. My father was Southern Baptist, but my mom was Catholic. And then they, would flounder around. And oh my gosh, we were doing Lutheran for a while. And then they, trying to find a compromise between the two for them. And then, And then eventually my mom was like, yeah, this isn't good enough. And then my dad was like, this isn't good enough in the conservative direction. So they started doing separate church, and then I would kind of like, half-ass go sometimes or whatever, just to go because my dad wanted me to go or whatever. But I was still raised with a lot of love and openness. I mean, they let me, in those days, they let me pierce my ears and shit like that, when I was 12, and like in middle school. And it was to the point, me and a buddy, we both pierced our ear, which was a big deal in 1989,
Oh yeah.
And it was so much to the point where some girl accused us of being devil worshippers because we pierced our ear. I had grown a mullet and was wearing band shirts, and so it was to the point where the school actually took the allegations seriously enough to call us into the counselor's office, and the principal comes in there and they start grilling us about whether or not we're devil worshippers or whatever. It's really strange to think about that nowadays.
Yeah.
But it just, the naivety and the fear within small communities around those things. Yeah, shit can freak you out when you're a kid. So
fuck it, yeah. I exactly the same thing. I was talking about WASP earlier. So we used to like the way our school worked is you went to high school when you went to the 8th grade, and then in the 8th grade you had like a choice of a couple of different subjects on top of all the mandatory ones that you needed to do, and then the one kind of voluntary course that I did was technical drawing, so it's like architecture and stuff like that.
Yeah,
which I totally did because I knew that I could breeze through it and not do any studying. But anyway, so I had this folder that you kept all your project work in, and everyone kept their folders separately. Well, like they kept it stored at the classroom, and I had wrapped the entire folder in this massive WASP poster. So I had Blackie Lawless off the Crimson Idol, like lying on the the way it looks like he's on the bed, but it looks like he's crucified. And then one day, we had break, and then came back to go pick up my folder, and I couldn't find it. I was like, "What the fuck's going on? Yeah, who took my stuff?" And so my girlfriend at the time comes over to me, and she says, "Jackie, I just want to let you know, all of the school except for you and your friends were called to the assembly hall at break time, and the head girl held your folder up to the entire school. This is a 900 strong school, by the way, and said." This is what I found hidden amongst some what belonging to one of the scholars of this school. Blah blah blah. Long story short, apparently she started crying. They had to pray for me. Whole big thing. So, dude, I've experienced that all that shit and then some. So
wow. How old were you?
And the thing is, I would have been 13.
Oh man, yeah.
And I mean, from there on, it just accelerated because I mean, my music taste didn't slow down. It was like Wasp soon gave way to Slayer, and then Slayer gave way to Obituary and Morbid Angel and Deicide, and you get to that point of no return in the metal journey where it's like I've now gone past the bands that are named in the Satanic Panic stuff. All those books and stuff that always came out, like these bands are the worst. Motley Crue, Black Sabbath, they're the most evil. And it's like, well, no one knows that Deicide is an evil band if I just say the name. So I just go on listening to them. So now when they ask me, what do you listen to, Jackie? Well, I listen to Cannibal Corpse, listen to Obituary. None of that bad stuff like Black Sabbath and Judas Priest. That's not for me.
Yeah, they were off the radar, right?
Oh fuck yes, that was the best thing ever. The only thing I needed to keep under the radar was King Diamond because I remember the one book that had done the rounds, and ironically, this is the book that got me to seek out the album and listen to it and get into King Diamond. But it had the album cover for Conspiracy, and he's like on the cover with his face paint on, and he's like doing his pulling his face. And I was like, this looks fucking brilliant. So I got hold of the record. I remember the first track I heard off that album was the Wedding Song, and it's like really twisted and evil and stuff. And I knew, from reading interviews with him, like, he was quite open about the fact that he's a Satanist. So you hear it and you're like, Jesus Christ, this is some weird shit. And I was like, again, you get that nervousness, but then the more he sings, it's like, fuck, this is brilliant. The more you hear it, the better it gets.
Then you get old enough to really understand what that means,
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah, and the thing too is like, speaking of all those bands back then, that's another something that I think about maybe more than I should, which is a lot of things, I suppose. But you named off all those bands, right? All those classic bands, and every one of those bands had a unique sound, right? They all you could just hear a song and you know who the fuck it was, right? Yeah. Well, it was Morbid Angel, Obituary, Cannibal Corpse, any of them. Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, like it was like unique sound through and through. They stood out. They just had a thing. Even though there might be a band that was sort of in the same neighborhood, there still was something about them. The vocals or something where you knew for sure who the fuck that was. And like nobody tries to do that shit anymore, hardly ever. It's like that, Napalm Death, all the bands, every band you can think of that really meant something to anybody and it stood the test of time. They were all intentionally carving a different path. They weren't jumping on a bandwagon, right? And so like that's there's a lot of value to that for me as well. And I think that that's another thing that kind of goes into what we really try to do. It's like you can honor your influences, right? You can your forebearers or ancestors, whatever you want to call them. Like all of those bands for me, I look back and I think about the ones that just that really mattered to me, or at least for what I'm mattered in the direction that I want to go with our music. It's just like I never would want to rip them off. You know what I mean? Like that was just like, that's like a massive, line. It's a big line you don't cross. You just don't cross that line. Yeah. You don't just rip somebody off. You can do a nod, you can do a throwback. You can have a moment even that kind of sounds like, but you don't write a whole fucking record that sounds like Slowly We Rot or something. You know what I mean? Like it's just like, even, and that's, and that's probably my biggest frustration with a lot of music these days is it's just, I guess there's a million more bands. So at some point there has to be some similarities, some overlap or whatever, but like,
well, so I would say what struck me about Verloren is that because I went back and I listened to the Grief Relic, and that's still a great record. What strikes me about Verloren is that I feel like a lot of your influences converge in a far more natural and organic way on this record. Like I can roughly kind of pick out what I would assume you're a big fan of listening to that. There's definitely a black metal strain coming into it. Definitely, some old school, probably more European death metal that you kind of get in there. Yeah. There's definitely a hint of Neurosis. There's definitely a hint of Mastodon. But none of it sounds in any way, and when I say those things, none of it sounds in any way ripped off. I can hear what your reference points are. But like I said, one of the things I really loved about this record is how seamless kind of all of that converges. Whereas I think a lot of bands that draw from so many different, influences, I feel like they have trouble kind of piecing it together in a tapestry that feels like a cohesive kind of singular song, as opposed to a collection of influences, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I don't know. I guess that's like, a lot of, not a lot, but there's always there's always one review out there that says we need to pick a lane, like we need to pick something and run with it. But I'm like, fuck that. I love grindcore. I love post metal or whatever it is you call Neurosis and the like, and it's all about, once again, it's all about anybody that can really harness an emotion and really get to a raw piece of you, right? Like if they can hook into a raw piece of how I feel or how I felt at some point, that really matters. Like something that's truly human and truly timeless, I guess would be the word. Like something that every person struggles with, no matter when, no matter where, right? So those basic things, just existential things, the existential struggles, right? So it's like anyone that can tap into that, I'm a really big fan of. So if it's the rawness of Barney Greenway's vocals, over a D beat or something, like I want to fucking, like that's how you get there. You know what I mean? To me, like that's how you get there. You know what I mean? And then like a Neurosis thing, like Times of Grace is another huge album for me. So like, there's a million moments on that record, which is how you get there. You know, that's how you express that emotion, is in sort of that way, you know. And it's, you know, it's all experimentation for us. We're much too lazy to really get into the theory aspect of it. I guess if you were really to break it down into scales and modes and all of the musical theory things, there's some probably mathematical formulas that have a similar result, but I don't know. To me, if it doesn't just, if it's not from the gut, then it's not going to be as genuine.
I was just about to say, I think when writing becomes too analytical, I think it becomes analytical at the expense of emotion. And that to me is a terrible thing, because the emotion, I completely agree with you, is what hooks you. You know, I think of some of my favorite guitarists. You know, they may not be technically, they're good, they're proficient technically, but they may not be they're not going to be at like the technical proficiency of a very high level jazz player or Eric Clapton or anything like that.
Sure.
But you take somebody like Matt Pike, where literally it sounds like when he picks up a guitar, music comes out of the guitar.
Yeah,
he doesn't. I don't know another way to describe it. And there's very few guitarists who I would attribute that quality to, but I would say he to me is one of the one of the people that's the best example of that. I think Dimebag's style of playing is exactly the same. There's just this feeling like, and actually Trey from Morbid Angel, same deal. There's this feeling like when they pick up the guitar, there's no thought, there's only emotion, and the emotion is channeled through those 6 strings or those 7 strings or however many strings they're playing with.
Yeah, it's you're absolutely right. You know, and I think that's, you know, and maybe a lot of people maybe don't realize it consciously. I'm sure in metal a lot of people do, but those 2 examples, Matt and Trey, both, that, and having toured with both of them, you know, and being able to have a really nice up close side stage view and really watch them go through those things night after night is like, you can really see that, what you're talking about coming out of them. And it's awesome that you bring up Matt Pike too, because like, I don't know what it is, but I for some reason, like, High on Fire drifts out of my periphery for a while, and then all of a sudden I'll just one day it'll click in my head. Like last weekend, I was like, man, I really need to listen to some High on Fire. So I literally listened to him for 8 hours straight on shuffle, you know, like full discography shuffle, and was just like, God damn, this, you know, like, what's wrong with me? Why do I stop? You know, it's like, I don't know what it is, but it's exactly what you're talking about, man. The riffs, the riff structure, the melodies, man, that, and just Dez's drumming is still just like, God damn, like he's like, it's another worldly thing, especially to witness live. You know? So
I agree.
So yeah, that's perfect. And then Morbid Angel too. You know, we toured with him on the Grief Relic touring cycle, and holy shit, watching that up close. I saw him when I was a kid, you know. But that, and getting to do it with Steve Tucker and do that whole era of their stuff was extra special for me, because I really like the darker, dirgier stuff anyways.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, it was fantastic, man. It was really an honor to watch them do that every night. So
the other band that springs to mind, just thinking about it now, Crowbar is another band like that. Ha! And I'm
Perfect,
exactly
man,
the same way as you with High on Fire and with Crowbar both.
Yeah.
It's bands that I'll go like maybe a month without really listening to, or 2 months without listening to, and then all of a sudden, like one day I'll go, man, I feel like listening to Oddfellows Rest. And then next thing I know, I've listened to Oddfellows Rest 5 times, and then I'm like, okay, I have to try something else now. Then Symmetry in Black comes on, and you just kind of work your way through the discography. And just getting back to High on Fire, everything about that band is fucking great. I mean, Matt Pike's voice to me, just alone. I was going to ask you. I mean, I know, because I knew you guys had played with him before. Is he the wild man that he appears to be on stage, off stage? You know, what is his personality like? I mean, because I really do feel like, again, much like you guys, to me, he's this truly undiscovered gem. I mean, the guy needs to be like, he needs to have Lemmy's profile in our generation, in my opinion. But I could
see that. Yeah, I mean, I could see that, but I think the whole reason, well, maybe, he's not too far off, but I think the whole reason why not would be because of what I mentioned earlier about too many fish in the sea, like so many things being watered down, and that nowadays, like, it's almost like there's not enough bandwidth for even the more special bands. They're going to boil up more so than others, just because that's how, luckily that's how it works. But I don't know. I think it's really boils down to that. But as far as his wild madness, like that's such a relative thing. Like he's a total sweetheart. I mean, he's gotten as wild as anybody does on tour, I guess. You do it for 20 years or whatever, and it's like, I don't know. I guess my frame of reference is maybe a little bit skewed because, doing it so long. I can't say that he's no wilder than most of the other guys I've toured with, but they're all pretty fucking wild.
Except for Trey plays Doom in the van.
Yeah,
everyone's out drinking.
Yeah, there's a lot of kind of everything going on all the time, but it's not, not all the time. It's just like some nights you got to blow off steam,
Yeah.
Dude,
I slightly off topic, but just because I was talking to someone about this earlier today. I'm busy reading a book. I think the writer's name is Tom O'Neill. The book is called Chaos. I don't know I don't know how deep you get into the whole serial killers thing. I've always been very fascinated by that. And Chaos is basically, it's about this, it's about a journalist who was tasked in 1999, I believe, with writing an article on the impact of the Manson murders on Hollywood and kind of the lasting legacy on the Hollywood community. And as he kind of delved into it, in fact, I believe this was 1991 rather than 1999. As he delved into it, he started uncovering all this crazy stuff about, the things that had not been widely reported about CIA mind control and, all sorts of crazy shit.
Yeah.
But I was, he was relaying, a couple of stories about Jay Sebring, who was one of the victims at the Tate House. One story in particular being that at one of the parties that Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski threw at the Cielo House, there was a drug dealer that showed up, and Jay Sebring and another gentleman who was at the party proceeded to tie him to a chair, flog him, and rape him for selling them bad drugs. And this was in full view of Warren Beatty, Jack Nicholson, Candice Bergen, the whole the audience was all watching, the crowd was all there, and what I was saying to a friend of mine earlier, I was like, with cancel culture being what it is right now, can you imagine what would be left of the back catalog of movies that many of us watch today? Maybe probably the back catalog of music that a lot of us kind of grew up listening to, if people had mobile phones in the late 1960s and early 1970s.
Half of that shit wouldn't have gone down,
Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah,
but anyway, sorry,
that's not there anymore.
That's off topic, but yeah, I got to that bit in the book today. I was like, Jesus Christ, this was fucked up. Anyways, I was going to talk to you.
I dabble in some of that stuff, so I'm familiar with all of those things and all the conspiracies about Manson's ties to MK Ultra and all the all those LSD experiments and stuff.
Just back on the topic of sequencing, because I think another thing about Verloren that I love is the sequencing of the record, because I think it flows together from start to finish so well. And again, I come from the same generation as you, where I'm from the cassette generation. And I mentioned Pantera earlier. Great example. I remember listening to A Vulgar Display of Power for about 6 months and rewinding straight after This Love every single time, because I thought the first 5 tracks were so great, and I kind of virtually ignored the second half of the record. And one day I was lying on my bed half asleep, and I was too lazy to get up and turn the cassette or to rewind the cassette, so I just turned around automatically. And Rise, no good. And then my favorite bit of the record, Live in a Hole, Regular People by Demons Be Driven. And I sat lying there thinking to myself, why the fuck did I never listen to this before? This is way better than side A. But it's such a lost art. amongst a lot of modern bands is properly sequencing a record and kind of thinking about what that end-to-end journey should sort of, what that experience should sound like and should feel like to the listener.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's funny because, and that's what just like what you're talking about, that's how I grew to, you buy an album with some idea of what it's going to be, right? Based on a couple of tunes maybe you've already heard or something. And then you're like super stoked on what those are and the singles or whatever. And then you burn them, and then you burn them, and then you burn them, and then you burn them. And if you listen to an album enough, you kind of get past that veneer, right? And so and then next thing you know, you get sick of those songs a little bit, and then the other ones start to show up, right? They start to show for what they are and what their value brings to the bigger picture of the album. And so it's like, then your B-sides or your deep cuts sometimes end up being your favorites, right? Like,
yeah.
You can have a whole album completely turn on you, right? So it's pretty wild to do that. And again, we're very conscious of that. It's really painstaking for me. I stress out a lot and have a lot of anxiety over things like sequencing and how it's going to work. And there was so many, especially with this one, there was so much new stuff that we were trying out, and there's so much of it that only works contextually, right? It doesn't, if you just pluck it out, it's and just listen to sometimes as much as one song or even like a part of a song, like it's nothing too significant, but it's it's part of the puzzle, right? So it's where it sits in that picture is exactly where it should be, and where it's really reinforcing the direction of that flow and that journey or whatever. And that's what we try pretty hard to do. Yeah. And it's a bit of a challenge. I mean, like having a noise track on there, and like some of the more esoteric things that we tried to pull off on this, or like only 2 songs each have only like one part really with clean vocals now. And it's like, that's nerve-wracking in itself, attempting to do something like that, but when you've tried everything else and it's the only thing that's really capturing the emotion that you want, like you just can't say no, right? Yeah. But it's it was a weird thing. The sequencing didn't come super naturally. Like some albums, they just kind of fall in place and you feel real good about it, and that's it, right? This one was like, there was some disconnects, and I think whether it's very obvious or not, there's like the middle section of the last track, it has that weird kind of white noise thing, which is I made Bo play a straight blast beat for the entire section, and then I modulated it and threw a bunch of effects on it and did volume swells so it would sound sort of like a white noise ocean swells, like waves, right? So we called it the drum ocean.
And by the way, I thought something was fucked with my Bluetooth when I heard that for the first time.
Yeah,
because I listened on these headphones, and these are really decent Bluetooth headphones. I'm listening to the track. I'm like, what the fuck is going on here? It's like, is my Bluetooth conking out, or what's the deal here? But yeah, it was. If you created that to stir a visceral reaction, you definitely got one from me.
Yeah, I did. So it started on the very last track, just for that middle part, because the subject matter of the song, it's a transition from the particle state to the wave state in quantum physics, and so I wanted this wave sound that was weird and sort of white noisy, right? Like energy sort of thing. And that's what we came up with. And we also don't use samples. We create everything organically. So that's what we wanted to do for this as well. And then when I went back and listened to the whole album, like wherever there's sort of a shift, like every couple of songs, there's sort of an energy shift, right? Or a mood shift. And it was a little too like stark and clunky for me. And so I went back and used that as a common, bond throughout that journey to give it sort of like, that's the final destination is the big one there, and From Ashen Shores. And then The other ones are sort of like the sneak preview or it's kind of the glue to hold it all together, I think.
Yeah. Another point you touched on earlier, and it we spoke about Neurosis, which is another band I really love. A song I kept on kind of coming back to in my mind as I was listening to this record was Locust Star off Through Silver and Blood, especially when you think about kind of, I was about to say, when you think about sort of emotional hooks. I think, I mean, and that band has done a number of really extraordinary things where, you really could go, I mean, this is, this sounds incredibly emotional and incredibly raw. But that final prayer on Locust Star, when he's like, the world to power, that which is above, it's just so fucking incredible. Great example of that. And as I said, I kept on, because I sort of sat on this album for a while before I spoke about it on the show, because I as I've mentioned on the review, it's like there's so much to unpack on it. I didn't feel like I should talk about it unless I could at least make sense of everything. But like I said, I kind of wanted to mention that to you because you'd mentioned Neurosis, and it was definitely something I came back to, that particular track as well as I was listening to this album.
Well, I can say as far as Withered is concerned, and what we wanted and what we've always tried to do, Neurosis is probably the most poignant influence for us. It's not evident because we're all black metal and death metal and all of these other things, but it's the anchor for me. It's my point. It's my number one point of reference, and it's just about wielding that power. They were so I discovered the things that I talked about earlier as a kid, but once I matured as a musician and once I was actively touring, when Troy from Mastodon, because we used to have a band together, he took me out to see Neurosis on their first Times of Grace tour. And they played this old big theater church here in town, and the whole back wall behind them was floor to ceiling pipes from a pipe organ that were still there in the venue. And then they had their giant projection screen, and they played. Scott's amp broke, so they only played 3 songs, but I still got about 25 or 30 minutes of music, and just bowled me over. It just blew me away. Like, just that was the biggest display of wielding power through music that I still have ever seen, I think. It was funny because they were on tour with Soulfly, and so like the bulk of the crowd was there for Soulfly, and golly, who opened? Jungle Rod or somebody? I don't know. So they were like, or there was the other band if they opened, I don't remember. But anyways, Neurosis was quite out of place for that kind of a tour. Which kudos to Soulfly for bringing them out, man. Like that's a bold move and really cool. But the crowd, most of the crowd didn't really want anything to do with Neurosis. But Troy was like, dude, you got to see this live, And so he took me out, and it was, it's still the thing, That's the brass ring for me,
Yeah, no, I without a doubt, and they're one of those bands where like same deal as what with High on Fire and Crowbar. There might be a while that goes by where I don't really listen to them, and then I suddenly just one day it just hits me like, fuck, I need to listen to Through Silver and Blood. I need to listen to Given to the Rising. It's just I'll kind of cycle through the entire discography once or twice, and then okay. It's as much as I can take for a little bit now, and then I slow down again. But just phenomenal band. I remember meeting Troy when Mastodon had just put out Remission, and they were playing at the Camden Underworld. Wow. Yeah. And there was only about, I mean, the venue isn't very big, and it was only about half capacity. And I remember turning to a friend of mine and saying, "I fucking guarantee you, this band is going to be huge. Like you could just tell. Even on Remission, which is a heavy record and." It's not particularly commercial, but you could just tell that there was something about them that was very different, like very, very different to most other bands that you see at that level.
Yeah, very fresh. And that's because they were, all of us, we kind of grew up in the same scene together, and we were all in multiple bands, pretty incestuous back in the late 90s and early 2000s. And you're absolutely right. And I think a lot of it really boiled down to it being sort of a way of filtering things like Neurosis and Melvins and some of the stranger proggier post-metal rock stuff, even Thin Lizzy and stuff like that, and somehow filtering it through this Southern metal lens or something, and it ends up coming out like that, so we've always had some comparisons to them, and I think it's just because we sort of pull from the same places, right? I love those guys. I guess I consider them more like peers, even though they're like massive, right? Than an influence, because we were touring along side by side for so long, and even shared a space with them and all that. But it's just like a rehearsal space, I mean. But so that's always been something. Yeah, they really found a way to take those things to a fresh place, and that's what when I talk about carving a unique path, they're one of the very, very few bands that's that did it, and I watched them struggle with some of the more challenging aspects of what they were doing as far as commercial appeal was concerned, and how they made very conscious decisions to stick to their guns. And I've always had, I still had a mountain of respect for them for doing that, because it obviously worked out, and that's how a band earns longevity. You can write to please for the quick payoff, but you know what I mean, it doesn't last. So
people see through it. I mean, I 100% agree with you. I think people in the long run, they gravitate toward authenticity. And there's a very good reason why, to this day, someone can stick on Immigrant Song, for example, and go, fuck that riff, listen to that. Or they can, that you still get goosebumps when you hear, Black Sabbath, the track, on the many, tens of iterations of the album that have been released. But when you hear that for the first time, it's like, fuck, this is good. And you'll always think that. And in 30 years from now, there'll be another generation of people who are discovering that for the first time. But I can guarantee you, and I'm sure you'll agree, no one's going to be discovering, Megan Thee Stallion. No one's going to be discovering Cardi B. None of that sort of shit. There's just certain things that are going to remain, and they're going to remain because of, I think, the emotional authenticity, the realness of the music. The fact
and
that it was created with.
And also the craftsmanship, right?
Yeah.
Like, so you do need a bit of technical prowess. You don't have to be the most technical guy out there, but you need to know your ropes well enough, just so you have the tools in your toolbox to create what you want to create, right? So, if you got a piece of shit saw, you're not going to build a nice piece of furniture. So, you know what I mean? Or if you don't know how to use it. So that's a big part of it too, which I got something I'm meaning to put on record, just going back to Crowbar once again. Kirk is 100 the riff wizard. Like, he is the master of all riffs, and I want to put that on official record. Yeah, Rafa and I both freak out. Like, I think, I'm gonna say something. So way back when I started my punk band, I played drums in Social Infestation, which was Troy joined later on, was the guy we started the band with, Chris, who also I started Withered with. He used to work at a record store, right? The big corporate one, Blockbuster or something like that. And it was one day a week where he was left running the store by himself. And it was like Friday or something like that, right? And it was right by the music store I worked at, and the guitar store that I worked at. And I went, and me and our singer would pop by there every Friday, and we called it Steal One, Get One Free Friday. And so he would let us pick whatever we want, like literally walk out with arms full of CDs. I'm sure that's cost me karmically over the years, but probably not corporate, whatever. Anyways, my point in that is one of the few things that I still have from those escapades is the Crowbar Live +1 EP. And that was my first Crowbar record or whatever. And that also that was a head turner for me. Yeah. And ever since then, and I do the, like, kind of what you were saying. I do have my my moments of detachment from them, and then I come back around and go, what the fuck is wrong with me? Why I'm not listening to this, you know?
Yeah.
So, but Rafe and I both are massive Crowbar fans as well. And we regularly on tour, there's always a couple of Crowbar days, you know, in the van. So, yeah, he's just, his riffs are so masterfully structured, and it's got everything, man. It's got everything. So sorry. Anyways,
and it's with him, it's not just the riffs, it's the voice, it's the lyrics, it's just everything.
Oh, anguish, right? The anguish.
Yeah. I mean, you know, they're one of those bands where, you know, my favorite track is very definitely a you know, one of the deep cuts, at least in my view. I've never heard them play it live, and I've seen them live a couple of times, but December Spawn to me is just such a fucking great tune. And I'm just looking at the lyrics again now. I mean, the way it's so beautifully written, because it's so it's so poignant, but it's also very open. I've always really liked very open-ended lyrics where I can kind of impose my own thoughts on it, my own. I can make it relevant to myself my own way. You know what I mean? Rather than, I don't want to hear somebody, you know, if somebody wrote a chorus like "Don't do drugs, it's bad for you" kind of bullshit, it doesn't mean the same to me as, you know, like the lyric, "Your December Spawn, agony you hold within you since the dawn of time. You're compelled to do what you do." It's just fucking brilliant.
Yeah, you know when a musician really knows suffering. You know what I mean? Like, there's a difference between someone who's been there and can write about it than someone who's just you know, fantasizing about it, right?
Yeah. No,
and it's yeah, man, his anguish is throughout all of that stuff, and it's just, man, it's something. Yeah, it's really good stuff.
So. No, I totally agree. And also, again, back to High on Fire, my favorite High on Fire track is also a deep cut, Ethereal, off of Death is This Communion. It's the second to last track.
Yeah.
The groove and the way that his vocals sound and kind of play along with the music is just masterful. That's another thing I really liked about Verloren as well. I love the melodic shouting, or like the melodic sort of growl, where you kind of almost have that little, or it's actually like screaming or shouting in key, which you guys do, and sometimes like you know, Barney in Napalm Death does it as well. Not obviously the same.
Yeah, that was my best Barney impression. Is really all.
Oh, really? I was about to say he does it as well. I mean, it doesn't sound the same, but I fucking love it. I mean, partly because, you know, having done smatterings of vocals myself, I was desperate to do it when I was a vocalist, and I could never get it right. So,
it was really, really hard.
How the fuck do you do it?
It's still a struggle for me. Like in rehearsal now, I'm like, I'm nervous to do this stuff live, because it takes a lot to get right in that sweet spot with that vocal styling. It's not something I was used to doing. Chris, the guy I started the band with, his vocals were a lot barkier like that. And so I kind of wanted to recapture that. Barney is one of my all-time favorite vocalists, which is why he did guest vocals on our second record. And we brought back intentionally a crustier element. So like on those songs, like that's all about the crust, right? So we're trying to, you know, that's our nod to His Hero Is Gone and Tragedy and the sort. And so I just felt like I wanted to do that kind of a thing. So so that's absolutely 100%. That's it.
That's naked Barney worship. And Barney's an interesting cat as well. And he's also he's you know, I mean, Napalm Death as a band, they're one of the few bands from that era that, to my mind or to my ears, still make music that's truly relevant. You know, there's a lot. I mean, I love Deicide as an example, but it's if we're very honest now, their best days are behind them, and it has been for a while. You know, even Obituary, who I love and who I feel like they stayed relevant for longer, because I still love. What the fuck is the album that's got Slow Death on? Anyway, there's a couple of records kind of later, Obituary, that I think Executioner's Return as an example is fantastic. Darkest Day, I think, is superb, but the last couple have just sort of treaded water for me a little bit. But Napalm Death somehow every fucking album that they put out is just great. There's just they'll always do something that's just a little bit different to what they did before. They're still uniquely Napalm Death, but there's always something that's just a little bit fresh. Like they,
Oh man,
they just added just a different seasoning on the on the, in Bonnie's case, vegan meal. But,
yeah. Oh man, and he's such a sweetheart too. He's always so nice. Yeah, we get to see him every time they come through. I usually run into him. I scam my way backstage somehow or another, on some of these big festivals and stuff. Know somebody involved, right? But I usually run into them. Yeah, man, those guys are the best. Yeah, sweethearts and amazing musicians.
Speaking of backstage, you guys are about to, I believe it's a couple of weeks from when we were recording this, you're about to play a release show for Verloren.
Oh yes, yeah, we are.
So are you in a position where you guys can start playing? Have you started thinking of touring or kind of what you do to push this record?
Yeah. It's been a little like from the hip a bit because everything is like just opening up. So we're kind of like trying to go for it so we don't miss any opportunities, right? But so we're just going to do the release show. We're also doing we're flying out for the Psycho Las Vegas Festival towards the end of August. Which will be a lot of fun. Got a lot of friends, bands playing that as well.
I was about to say that whole festival has a fucking badass lineup, like really cool lineup.
It's completely stacked. It's like 30 bands that we've toured with, like great old buddies. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Yeah. And then we're putting together. We have a tour announcement. It's not out yet, but I think it's going to be November. But so we'll be doing some touring there, and we're fighting. Everybody's elbowing their way onto tours to make up for the last year. So yeah, it's like, there's a lot of tours that were already planned that are just happening now instead of then. And then, so there's a lot less room for newer ideas, but we got a few things cooking. Hopefully hop back over to Europe next year, sooner than later. So,
and you guys are on a fucking crazy day as well. I'm just looking now. So Saturday, August 21st.
Yeah, we get to do Saturday with Danzig. Right?
Cannibal Corpse, Dying Fetus, Red Fang, brilliant. Pig Destroyer, awesome. Poison the Well, massively underrated band. I really like them. I Hate God. Who else do you guys have on?
I think I don't know. Cephalic is playing. I'm trying to remember everyone I've talked to. Primitive Man is playing. Those are buddies.
Yeah, Primitive Man plays on the same day as you guys.
Yeah, and
Phallic Carnage, I think, is on the
Friday, right? Yeah.
I mean, Friday is nuts as well.
We've toured with them guys a bunch. And,
Emperor, Mayhem, Magua, Jesus Christ, yeah, no, it's nuts. I've never been to Psycho Las Vegas, and what I notice is like it's more so than at least the vast majority of festivals we get over in Europe. There seems to be kind of a mix where, they'll have Emperor and then, Giza is playing as well, or, Ty Seagull is playing. What is the response of the average Mayhem fan to the Giza?
Not much at all here, at least. You know what I mean? Like there are festivals that do that. But I mean, I would say, so the bulk of the crowd is not going to be the average Mayhem fans, first of all.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, but like, I'm stoked about it. Like the Jizza, like I love Wu-Tang Clan, man. I grew up listening to
same.
So like, I'm really excited about that. And a bunch of those things, but I've got a pretty broad palette anyways, I guess. But I grew out of the metal or die
if you
attitude many
if you don't listen
ago.
To only metal, you're a poser.
I'm with you on that. I'm glad that's kind of gone by the wayside, but but yeah, so I mean it's Vegas, man, so it's just like that's a whole thing in itself, man. It's exactly what you imagine it's going to be.
Dude, just talking about hip hop. I'm a big fan of like old school hip hop. I think most of what was created post 1997 is rubbish, and even 1997 is sketchy. The only thing that happened there that I think is truly masterful is the debut Psycho Realm album. But as I was digging back into the archives, one album jumped back out at me recently. Let the Rhythm Hit Him by Eric B and Rakim.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
Oh
Yeah.
God, dude, that is so
Yeah,
fucking
that's a
cool.
good
If
one,
you,
man. It's been a long time since I
yeah,
dabbled in any of that. But I do know that one. It's funny actually. Chris, the guy who I started Withered with, he had to he went through some stuff and lost his place to stay. So he was living in my basement, right? He moved in right before COVID happened. So he ended up living with me for almost a year. It was supposed to be a few weeks. It ended up being a year.
I bet your
But
wife loved that.
oh no, it was all good. You know, she
Yeah.
loves him too. We're all close. But the and luckily we had the room. But he was at the time really dabbling back into that old R&B and old hip hop and stuff. And yeah, and I reconnected with a little bit of that, especially that record. We listened to that a few times.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And you know, again, sad state of affairs that in 2021 there's not a single rapper that sounds even close to those guys. I mean, the level of like vocal skills, the flow, just everything was fucking spot on with those guys. You know, and in a way that, like I said, the younglings will never get.
Yeah, and that's the thing, you know, that's the technological crutch, right? So you can lean on technology a little bit too much. And I'm not saying I don't know who does or who doesn't, but a lot of people do, because they have to, because they don't have the skill or the talent or whatever you want to call it, to nail those certain things. And that's, you know, and that goes back to timeless albums and all of that stuff. And it's just about like, I'm a big believer in doing your homework, and if you can't play it, don't play it. You know what I mean? So like Verloren, we did 0 drum triggers and samples, no editing. It's the raw performances for that. Same to the vocals. Even though I've never done clean vocals before, we didn't do any fucking auto tune or whatever. You know, it's just yeah, I wanted it to be real.
Just
you know,
in
that
the
because
studio.
I don't want to show up live and like, you know, and it sucks, you know.
Yeah. So just in the studio, quick satanic ritual to get the, you know, the Satan will assist you as you're recording your instruments, and then whatever comes out following the demon possession, that's what makes it onto the record.
Yeah, I think the closest I get to that is about a half a bottle of whiskey for courage.
Oh, dude, you know, back to the Satanism business. There were so many stories about how you know, Brian Johnson from AC/DC, before he goes on stage, he drinks a pint of cat's blood, and that's what makes his voice sound like that. And there were people that seriously believed that shit.
Man. Yeah.
Brother, I want to thank you so much for your time. It was an absolute blast catching up with you. I so hope to see this record blow up for you guys as well, because like I said, I think it's phenomenal. I think it's absolutely fantastic.
Man, thank you so much.
I made a point of getting Katie to hook me up with talking to you when I heard it, because you know, I'm a big believer in trying to do as much as I possibly can, give as much back as well. So hopefully a few people have picked it up listening to the podcast too.
Yeah, I hope so, man. I really enjoyed this casual approach to this whole thing. It was it's a lot like no pressure.
No, it's well, there is pressure, because I've always said to people, like, it's this. I always have this anxiety before I record an episode where you I don't know whether you ever watched Seinfeld, but you know, there was a scene between George and Mr. Peterman where George has kind of run out of stuff to say to him, and he's like, "So what about sports? Do you like sports?" And I'm always scared I'm going to have that. So what about sports? You like sports moment with somebody, because doing the podcast the way that I do it, you know, like I said, I purposefully try not to really prepare. Like I treat it like if you and I were to meet up in a bar and we suddenly start discovering we've got a bunch of stuff in common. I mean, we're listening to the same type of music, so immediately we have that, right? Sure. And then generally speaking, hopefully you start fleshing out a few other things that you have in common. But it's tricky because, you know, you're also dealing, you know, as I'm sure you've experienced firsthand, you're dealing with autistic folks. Many of them aren't the most, especially in black metal, are not the most extroverted characters. So
yeah,
teasing that conversation out of them is not always so easy. But you were a phenomenal guest, mate. Exactly the you're into the Necrosphere material. So thank you very much.
You got it.
All right, dude. Take care of yourself.
You too, man. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. That was a song called The Predation by Withered off of their fantastic new record, Verloren, which, as I said at the top of the show, is available right now on Season of Mist. And thank you so much to Mike for coming on the show. Had such a great time talking to him, and hopefully it won't be his last visit to Mean Street Studios. I suspect, based on how well we got on, that it won't be his last. But like I said, make sure that you check out this record, an easy contender for the top 10 of 2021, in my opinion. Right, let us now talk about some new music. Mayhem have just put out an EP called Atavistic Black Disorder / Commando, which is quite a mouthful for what in reality is a very short EP at about 23 minutes. I should say at the start of this review that if you have been a long-time listener of the podcast, then you will know that this particular EP was first hinted at on none other than Into the Necrosphere, episode 45. And if you have yet to listen to that episode where I spoke to Ghoul of Mayhem, then make sure that you go back into the archives and do so. But just for the record, it was first discussed on this show. We also hinted at the potential existence of a Burzum cover on that episode. Unfortunately, for those of you like me who've been holding out for or been holding out hope for something like that, and you may well need to break out the hankies and start crying because it's not on there. I understand that even if it did exist, I completely get why they would have excluded it. You know, it kind of reminds me a little of that Seinfeld episode where Jerry is not going to have a three-way with his girlfriend and her roommate, and George asks him why, and he says because of society. But that's kind of how it feels like. But again, like I said, I mean, you know, in the name of good taste and all that, I get why they would not have included it. But what you do get for your hard-earned, should you decide to go ahead and buy this, are 3 tracks, one of which is brand spanking new. At least it was recorded on the Demon Sessions and did not see the light of day. The other 2 made it onto the Demon, I think the limited edition or the special edition. Either way, it was the one that appeared on all streaming services. So most likely you would have heard those 2 tracks. And then, of course, the 4 much talked about punk rock covers. Let's start first and foremost with, in my view, the album or the EP centerpiece, which is the unreleased track Voces Ab Alta. Why this did not make it onto Demon, I find quite surprising, because I think it would have been right up there with one of the best on an already excellent record. I mean, it really kind of plays to all of Mayhem's strengths. You know, Hellhammer's drumming sounds nuts. You know, he kind of has that really cool way of bookending a blast where it sounds like he sort of blasts and then, you know, just hits the snare quickly, like 3-4 times, like dun 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 dun. You guys know what I mean if you hear it. Attila sounds incredible. We're kind of gifted with another of Attila's clean sung gems, which obviously tossed in a couple of times on the last record. And then right at the very end of the album, or sorry, at the very end of the song, for those of you guys that were missing a Burzum cover, there is a distinctly Burzum-sounding keyboard piece that kind of finishes off that song and comes in at around the 5-minute mark, but it sounds absolutely fantastic. So great track. The next 2 songs, like I said, they did appear on the special edition of Demon, and if you know that record as well as I do, I mean, they're both very cool tunes as well. So, you know, nothing really to kind of talk about there in any great detail, because, as I said, I'm pretty sure most of you would have heard it. If we then get to the punk rock covers, I'd say the first thing that surprises me about that is the choices. So Discharge and Rudimentary Penny, I definitely get. Dead Kennedys and the Ramones, that's a little bit of a surprise, I've got to say, but then again, I guess that was the intention. I would say of the 4 covers, the ones that are most interesting to me are the Discharge cover. I think that's really, really good. It's of a track called In Defense of Our Future. And then there's a Rudimentary Penny cover for a song called Only Death, which I really like as well. My least favorite of the covers is Dead Kennedys. It's a song called Hell Nation, which I didn't like to begin with. I mean, I don't mind Dead Kennedys, but that song has never really done anything for me. It also features Attila doing his best Jello Biafra impression, which I have to say is ironic, considering the fact that if you observe the anus of society known as black metal Twitter, you'll find that Mayhem continually get accused of being white supremacists and Nazis and whatever else is the fucking in vogue. The in vogue ridiculous accusation of the day, so for them, for these Nazis to go ahead and cover one of the most left-leaning bands in punk rock history, I think there's some irony in that. But anyway, I think overall this EP serves as a pretty nice epilogue to the Demon cycle. And if history is anything to go by, this is, Mayhem will do something completely different the next time around. Like if you think about their last couple of records, Ordo at KO, Esoteric Warfare, and Demon all sound very distinctly different. I don't expect that they're going to repeat themselves on their next album. I think they probably released this as a means to sort of remind folks that they exist and, buy tickets to the shows, which, by the way, I have a ticket to the show. I've had it for fucking 2 years, or a year and a half, or however long, and obviously that show keeps getting postponed. I think now the London date is May the 22nd. So to Ghoul and the gang, I am very much looking forward to that. Whether you're going to buy tickets to their shows or not, savor every minute of this EP, because another thing that history will indicate is that it's going to take quite some time for Mayhem to release any new music beyond this. So enjoy. I think that if the new music is anything as good as the upcoming track that I'm about to play, then I am already giddy as a schoolboy at Christmas. This is a song called Voces of Altar. Voces Ab Alta by Mayhem off of Atavistic Black Disorder. And if you want to check out the punk rock covers, that's on the B side, which is called Commando. Enjoyable stuff. Like I said, it would have been nice to hear Dunkelheit, although actually I know the actual cover that was rumored to have been recorded was Jesus Dort. But anyway. Let's talk now about Domination Campaign. They are a side project featuring two members of Psychroptic out of Australia. They've got a record out called Onward to Glory that came out this weekend on Prosthetic Records. Those members in question are Jason Papiat and Joe Haley. Right off the bat, I can tell you, if you are expecting anything that sounds like Psychroptic, you are in for disappointment. This band very much trades in the sort of technical flourishes, the melody, maybe some of the more traditional death metal influences that Psychroptic have for just pure groove-laden savagery. And if I had to say which bands most come to mind as I listen to this, I would most certainly name check Bolt Thrower, Jungle Rot, Earth Crisis, and All Out War. This is intense, aggressive, badass, mostly mid-tempo, riff-orientated. And I particularly enjoy Jason Papiat's vocals because they sound so unique, but at the same time really kind of recall those Neanderthal caveman days of mid-90s US hardcore, which I must confess I miss very, very much. There's nothing much by way of sophistication to this record. It's 8 very straightforward tracks, but the riffs are memorable, the chugs are mean, and for me personally, this is a mainstay on my gym playlist. And I would suggest that unless aquasizing with the elderly is what you do when you go to the gym, it should be a mainstay on your gym playlist also, as is proven by my next track. This is a song called The Sniper's Gaze. That is The Sniper's Gaze by Domination Campaign. The album is called Onward to Glory. It's available right now on Prosthetic Records. It is fucking kick-ass, and you need to get hold of it if you have not done so already. Time right now for some news. And as ever, we start on Metal Storm. The first headline there, Benighted dropping a new single next week. I am not particularly excited about that. Benighted to me are like Cataclysm, in that they are a band who on paper sound like they should be a band I enjoy. I've just never been able to really get into them. But anyway, French death grind masters Benighted will be dropping a brand new single next week, July 14th, called A Personified Evil. Francesco Pioli of Fleshguard Apocalypse also performs on this track as a guest vocalist. Another band who I think are hugely overrated, Fleshguard Apocalypse, but anyway. Cover artwork of the single, which can be seen below, was created by Remy Cooper from Headsplit Design. Yippee. Moving on, Vulvodynia launch second track off the forthcoming album. I've spoken before about Vulvodynia, and I've said mean things about their name. Vulvodynia, of course, countrymen of mine out of South Africa who have been signed to Unique Leader. I have to say, the more that I hear music coming off of this record, the more I think these guys have done a fucking hell of a job. So this is this new track is called Banquet of Enigmatic Horrors Part 1 Terror. It's a preview track off the studio album Praenuntius Infinity, and it will see its official release on September the 17th, 2021, as I mentioned before, via Unique Leader Records. This is deathcore, but as much as I'm not really a big fan of deathcore, I think what they do really well on this song is inject a real palpable sense of darkness and menace into the riff. I think that the vocals are cool as much as they don't. They definitely sound like he definitely sounds like a deathcore vocalist, but at the same time, he doesn't play into the pig squeals and all that shit too much, which is good. As I said, I'm very surprised. To me, this is sounding more and more like an album that is worth keeping an eye out for. So, good job to these guys. And once again, it's a big deal when a band gets signed to, or a South African band gets signed to an overseas label, especially an overseas label that has the cachet of a Unique Leader Records. And for those of you guys that haven't seen, Unblessed Divine also signed to a record label some time back. The name of which escapes me now. I know it's a relatively big deal. Massacre Records. I was just about to say I knew it was a big deal, but they've been pretty quiet. I'll reach out to Lee and see what they are up to as far as new recordings and stuff like that are concerned. But it's good to see that the scene in South Africa has evolved as well, because it used to be, particularly when I was banging, it was fucking terrible. There's no point even skirting around it. It was awful. If you listen to that pile of shit band that I spoke about a while back, Dreams of Nightmares, that's kind of the average of what it sounds like or what the scene sounds like in South Africa. So Unblessed Divine, Vulvodynia, they are the exception to the rule, that's for sure. Blood Red Throne releasing Imperial Congregation record in October. Shortly after joining Nuclear Blast Records, Norwegian death metal vets Blood Red Throne announced the release of their 10th full-length installment, Imperial Congregation, due on October the 8th, 2021. This is a new single that they've released called Ithaca. It sounds very much like all of their other music, which sounds very much like third-tier death metal to me, and thus boring. Ministry return with new studio album on October the 1st, 2021, or October 1st, 2021, has been set as the official release date of the Ministry's newly announced studio album dubbed Moral Hygiene, recorded with engineer Michael Rozon, also behind the boards on Americant, at Shizer Dog Studio. The band's 15th long player features 10 tracks. One of them, Good Trouble, is now available for streaming as an official lyric video. The 10 tracks are Alert Level, Good Trouble, Sabotage is Sex, Disinformation, Search and Destroy, Believe Me, Broken System, We Shall Resist, Yay, Death Toll, TV Song 6. What I would say is pretty much the only good thing so far that I've heard off of this record or that I've seen off of this record, I should say, and if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see it right now, is the cover, because the cover reminds me a little bit of Pure Chewing Satisfaction by Lard, which is a fucking fantastic record. Most folks who know me will know that I have been a massive fan of Ministry for the vast majority of my life, and I feel like, and I think that Psalm 69 was certainly one of the most influential records in terms of my musical evolution. That being said, I've heard both Alert Level and Good Trouble, and what I will say is times sure have changed since the glory days of Just One Fix, Filth Pig, Breathe, So What, and all of the other Ministry classics. It's almost like Al Jorgensen doesn't have it anymore. And I was on board for the quote-unquote Bush trilogy, and then when they made their comeback, I just they just lost me. I don't really think they've done anything that is consistently worth jack shit since then. And the other thing that I find insufferable about Al Jorgensen in 2021 is the fact that, back when he was doing the Bush trilogy, I could get on board with the idea of anti-war, the Bush administration was fucking up the campaign in Iraq, as much as the war was a stupid thing to begin with, everything that they did post the war, made it 10 times worse. So, absolutely on board with his message and his idea there. Where we diverge, and, again, for being a free speech absolutist, he's entitled to whatever he wants to say. I'm just not obligated to like it. Where we diverge is, around his attacks on, I thought Trump, to me, was a cheap target for him. It didn't feel anything as well thought out as Bush. And then on Alert Level has got fucking idiot, what's her name? That stupid entitled brat. How dare you, girl? Her name escapes me now. I don't know why it escapes me, but anyway, it'll come back to me. And then Good Trouble apparently is was inspired by the BLM riots. I am personally not so sure what's inspiring about destroying, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of property and businesses in predominantly owned minority neighborhoods. Many of those businesses predominantly owned by minorities, never to reopen. So, a lifetime's worth of work lost. And as I've said before, did the BLM riots increase or improve racial relations in the US? I personally don't think that it did. So I feel like Al has gone from somebody who I feel like who stood with moral conviction for something and actually put some real thought into it, to just going, okay, what's the, what outrage theme is in vogue this week? I know it's climate change or it's BLM or whatever the case may be. I'll just hop on board that. I think it's fucking lame. And it makes it actually, it almost in a way, it makes him feel old. But anyway, let's move on. Nothing else really capturing my attention. Deaf Heaven streaming new track. I think Deaf Heaven is a massively overrated band. And I don't like the idea of, black metal with any sort of happiness or major chord reliance. Mork unveiled the video for Fortil Herska. I should actually reach out to him again and just tell him that fuckface from Snapper Music has yet to reply to my 7 emails trying to hook up an interview. Unfortunately, this individual did not study at the school of Katie Irizarry, so knows nothing of professionalism. But I know when he was up for coming on the show, so it'd be cool to have him on. And this is a great track. I really, really like it. It features a performance by Campfire vocalist Dolk, and that is very cool too. Wolves in the Throne Room, debut Spirit of Lightning song. Also a band who, as much as I have tried to get into them and see what the fuss is all about, I personally think that they are a fucking load of shit. And this Spirit of Lightning song is awful. Absolutely awful. If you listen to this, you may as well start listening to fucking Belsagoth. Mayhem reveal new dates for upcoming European tour. As I said, I've got me some tickets for that. Very much looking forward to it. Whether it happens or not, we will see. I happen to be of the belief that these lockdowns and all of this bull mash is going to carry on, unfortunately, for a very, very long time. I just hope that it doesn't fuck up too many bands, too many businesses before it's all said and done. Because I do think the pendulum will sway the other way eventually. But it's going to be a while before that happens. The Amenta to tour Australia with Earthrot, two great bands. My favorite, of course, being the Amenta. It was also posted on social media this morning that today, which is the 12th of July as I'm recording this, marks I think it's the 17-year anniversary of their first record, Ocasis, which you can go back to this day, and it will absolutely blow your mind. Fantastic stuff. No, nothing else really to talk about. I spoke last week about the At the Gates record. I really like that album. Interesting to see how different people's opinions are of it, though. But anyways, let's move on. So we move on to Blabbermouth. John Bush says solo tour celebrating his era of Anthrax is becoming a very good possibility. I have to say, as much as I have thrown shade at Anthrax over the John Bush incident, what I have really enjoyed has been these retrospective videos that they've been doing on YouTube, kind of celebrating, I think, their 40-year or their 30-year anniversary. I think it's their 30-year anniversary. Very, very cool stuff. And I think that it's given me some slightly different insights, I think, into the situation with John Bush as well. Not necessarily, I mean, I still am very firmly in the camp of Bush being my favorite Anthrax frontman, and the Bush years being my favorite Anthrax era. But I kind of see it from their point a little bit more now as well. But I think it'll be cool for John to do that. And I think some of the material that's on Sound of White Noise and even on Stomp 442, it's fucking excellent. And it's not just excellent, but it really holds up well to this day. So I would strongly approve of something like that, John. And it would be fucking cool to have him on this podcast as well. He was one of those guys where I remember recording my interview with him for Chronicles of Chaos. I recorded 2 actually with him, and it was one of those where I really wished that I could share the audio with people at the time, because I felt like transcribing it into black and white, question and answer shit is you kind of lose a little bit of the dynamic of the conversation. But yeah, it'd be fucking cool to have him on. I might actually see if I can make that happen. This is a very non-into the Necrosphere band, but I actually wanted to talk a little bit about this because I read this fucking garbage and I had some opinions on it. So, Candlebox frontman urges Congress to pass responsible gun laws, says gun violence is an epidemic. First and foremost, this phrasing, which is very popular in the mainstream media about gun violence being an epidemic, is so fucking farcical. It is ridiculous. If somebody gets in a car drunk and drives into plows into Granny and kills her, do we suddenly say that we need to pass responsible car ownership laws and that cars are an epidemic? No, cars are the tool. The problem sits with the human being and how the tool is used. And by the way, I don't have a dog in the fight as far as gun laws are concerned. Either way, I live in the UK. No one can own a gun here unless you're some fucking council-dwelling riffraff and you're a drug dealer. But yeah, there's no gun ownership here. I'm never going to own a gun. I've never owned a gun. But I do think that there's some seriously intellectually dishonest arguments going around when it comes to the whole gun debate, and this one is a great example. So this moron says, Candlebox vocalist Kevin Martin, when people read the words gun violence awareness, a lot of folks just see the word gun and get up in arms about the government coming to try and take their firearms, as opposed to taking a step back to think about the reality of the situation. I think that he ought to take a step back and think of the reality of the situation. Guns are embedded in U.S. culture like fucking apple pie. And if you did do something like they did in Australia or even in South Africa, which remains one of the most violent cities or countries in the world, where they do a gun amnesty, not a gum amnesty, but a gun amnesty, do you genuinely think that the criminals are going to go, all right, folks, we fought these turf wars and, robbed people and, killed people and done our drive-bys and all of our other bullshit with guns, but it'll be more fun and just make it a little bit more sporting if we use baseball bats and stones. No fucking way are criminals going to give back their guns. So you might have this utopia in mind where no one owns a gun or where people give back all of their assault rifles and whatnot. The problem isn't the gun. The problem is the criminals. You have a criminal element in the US which is running rampant thanks to moronic shit like fucking defund the police and ACAB and all of this other crap. What happens when you defund the police? Shock horror, crime goes up, as the people in Chicago and New York and, or every other place that has pushed this defund the police nonsense in America are now experiencing. And if you're on the side of defund the police, that's absolutely fine, but then you need to be willing to live with the consequences, because the consequences are demonstrable and they're there. And I think also all of these, ACAB fuckheads, we'll see how strongly you stand by your convictions the day that you need a policeman to come and help you out. But anyway, so it says here, the video for In Your Hands pays tribute to people who've lost their lives from injuries inflicted by guns. Martin cites some sobering facts. There have been more than 19,000 deaths from gun violence in the US alone during 2021 so far. No, there have not, you fucking idiot. There's been about 8,000. I think the Washington Post article that I read, and Washington Post of all news outlets, certainly want guns to be a thing of the past. So they're not going to exactly lie about this. I think as of May, it was 8,100. I can't imagine that it's suddenly fucking more than doubled in June. But anyway, 19,000 deaths from gun violence in the US alone during 2021 so far. And the number has been staggering year after year. The phenomenon is clearly an epidemic, and it's shocking to me that people aren't willing to acknowledge that. While I'm 100% supportive of the Second Amendment, I'm concerned about the amount of damage that can be done very quickly with one small instrument in the wrong hands. Easy way to solve this problem: more police on the streets, tougher sentences for people that are committing crime. I don't know whether this dipshit believes in defunding the police, but, again, if you believe that social services is the answer when it comes to public safety, you are a fucking imbecile. KK Downing says David Ellefson's joining KK's priest was never a consideration. Why is this even coming up? I mean, I don't believe that it was ever spoken of. I feel like KK Downing is another one of those people that just grabs the phone at every given opportunity and jumps on the line to Obari at Blabbermouth and says, listen, I just want you to know, I never left Judas Priest. They left me. And in this instance, this random shit about David Ellefson joining his band. I'm not sure David is joining any band at the moment, aside from joining God's band. I spoke earlier about ministry. I also spoke earlier about Dead Kennedys, by the way, and Jello Biafra. One thing that I for sure have to say, there are few, as much as I like some of the stuff that Jello has done. I mean, there's some Dead Kennedys tracks that are great. I love Lord. It's a little bit like ministry. I find Jello Biafra to be one of the most insufferable human beings on the face of the earth, and I have yet to hear anything remotely approaching a well thought out critical idea coming out of his mouth. He's a typical one of these fucking charlatans that, because he's relatively well spoken, he's quick on his feet, he is held up by members of the metal press as an intellectual, and I just think it's an absolute fucking joke. But anyways, other musical jewels on the upcoming release included a collaboration with Jello Biafra, Jorgensen's cohort and side project Lard on Sabotage is Sex. I mean, as I said, the songs I've heard off of this are absolute crap, and it's a shame because Ministry have a back catalogue that is absolutely fantastic, and I've always been a huge fan of Ministry. Anyway, Lamb of God's Randy Blythe says it's finally time for him to write his second book. Hooray, that'll be really exciting. I bet we get to hear all about Randy's take on COVID and on the fact that it's because of eating animals that we're all sick. So he writes, the 50-year-old singer, it's been 6 years since my first book, Dark Days, came out. I've been kind of busy, but I can't screw around any longer. It's finally time to write a new one. The proposal is done, the publisher's accepted it, and the contract is hammered out and in the mail. Shit, that means I actually have to write this thing. All I'll say is A, it's another non-fiction book, and B, I just spent 2 weeks utterly consumed by writing the freaking introduction. 2,296 words in 15 days. That's not a lot, but I want it to be right. Plus, I'm just stretching the old muscles, getting back in shape for the brutal long haul that lies ahead. The sustained, creative heavy lifting required to write a book makes writing the lyrics for an album look like preschool finger painting. Actually, I will say this about Randy, as much as I might joke about his political leanings and the drivel that comes out of his mouth when he talks politics, the man can write some seriously good lyrics. He's got a lyrical style that reminds me a lot of Phil Anselmo, in that it's very kind of open-ended, open to interpretation, and it's never. I don't like lyrics that are written in a way where it's kind of in your face. Where I think I made a joke about this a while back, where it's like, they sort of prescribe these rules for life to you, like, go to school every day, blah, 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 stay positive. It's like a mixture between a fucking positivity meme and the Bible. I don't care for lyrics like that. But I do really like Randy's lyrics. Anyway, it's not a book I'll read. So I am, however, reading one book that I can strongly recommend to all of you guys if you haven't read it yet. Chaos by Tom O'Neill. It's I've got it on Audible. I checked it out because I listened to the Quentin Tarantino interview on the Joe Rogan Experience. It's basically about, and I think I mentioned it on the episode with Mike as well. So yeah, ignore me if it sounds like I'm repeating myself. But it's basically about how Charles Manson and the Manson family appear to have been CIA operatives, or at least Charles Manson was. And there was all sorts of cover-up and shenanigans going on in the case. Really interesting stuff. So strongly suggest that you check that out if you haven't done so yet, or if you're a book reader. There's nothing else really of any note. Marilyn Manson has apparently turned himself into police in connection with an alleged assault in New Hampshire. I hope he likes reading books, because that's really going to be all that he has to do when he's slanging it in prison. I am done for this week. Thank you so much to everybody who tuned into the show. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. I say it every week, and I'm going to say it again. There are so many podcasts to listen to. And the fact that all of you, jump on and check out this show week in and week out blows my mind, and I find extremely humbling indeed. So thank you so much. I am certainly inspired to keep on cranking these out. Next week will be episode 87, featuring the great Marco of Stellar Master Elite, and we're going to be doing an update on my top 50 favorite black metal bands. So I did talk about this a little while back. I've kind of changed the scoring mechanism a little bit, made it somewhat more scientific. Interesting, the results that turned up. So we're going to be talking about that and a whole lot more. I've also got on tap Katie Irizarry of Season of Mist and a whole bunch of other folks. Plus, I have got in the works a special bonus episode, which I will be kind enough not to number. It's going to be an update on what's currently in my hi-fi rack. And I've got Terry Ellis of Pursuit of Perfect System. Great YouTube channel if you're into high-end audio and hi-fi. You definitely need to check it out. And Terry has become a pretty good friend over the last couple of years. So it's going to be a fun conversation, a little bit different to what we normally do on here. But if you if you want to listen to music on something that's a heck of a lot better than fucking iPhone earbuds or whatever other nonsense people listen to music on, then you definitely want to check that episode out when it goes live. I reckon maybe in about 2 to 3 weeks. On that note, I hope that all of you stay safe and healthy in the week ahead. I'm going to play out with a track that really I I don't know why I slept on this album, but after I spoke with Alan, I went back into the Dread Sovereign back catalog. It's a band that I completely ignored. I don't know why. This is my way of atoning. But this is a track that came off of an album that was released very early this year. Now, for sure, an inclusion in my top 20 of 2021. The album is called Alchemical Warfare. The band, as I said, Dread Sovereign. And this is a song called Ruin Upon the Temple Mount. Stay safe, you bad motherfuckers, and I'll see you guys next week.